Hi guys, and welcome to Medical Myths and Mysteries. We are going to be talking all about some really horrible diseases and how way back when they used to treat them and how medical science has changed from then until now. Now, we are going to be talking about some real diseases, and though we're going to be poking some fun at some of the old ideas about it, these are real diseases and they are serious business. Now, to start, I want you to think back. I want you to close your eyes for a second, and I want you to think about what you think Dundee might have looked like in the Middle Ages. So we've got Vikings that are running up and down the coasts. We've got stinky environments. There's people living all over the place, all on top of each other. And to make things worse, we've got the plague running riot through the UK. Now, unfortunately, the plague causes lots of these sores in your armpits, size of golf balls, in your armpits, in your groin, and all of your lymph nodes, and they're really stinky, and it's really, really nasty. And unfortunately, a lot of people died from this. Now, to make matters worse, if you had to be visited by the doctor, what do you think the doctor would have looked like? Think the doctor would have been in a nice long white coat? Actually, unfortunately, the doctor would be wearing something that looks like this. This is a plague doctor mask, and it looks to me actually kind of terrifying. I think I'd be pretty terrified if a doctor showed up to my door wearing one of these. But they did this because they believed in something called miasma theory, and that was the theory that bad smells caused diseases and made people sick. And so what they would do is they would stuff these masks full of herbs and flowers and nice-smelling things to try and protect them. Now, along with this, they'd be wearing a long, dark black robe, and they'd have a poking stick, so they wouldn't get too close to people who were sick. Now, do you think this worked? Do you think this protected the doctors? It's kind of weird, right? Do you think bad smells actually cause diseases? Well, weirdly, the masks actually did help, but not for the reason they thought. See, they didn't know about germs back then. And because of that, when they were all covered up, they were actually protecting themselves from other germs, bacteria, and viruses being transmitted to them. And because they were keeping their distance, they were actually able to keep themselves protected from getting sick. So even though it wasn't the bad smells that were making them sick, using these actually did help somewhat. And some of the cures that these plague doctors would prescribe were things like shaving the bum of a chicken and strapping it to your chest. Because that's going to work, right? No, probably not. Also, they thought sitting in the sewers would work. If you sit in the sewers, then you can't smell the bad smell that's causing the disease because you're surrounded by other bad smells. That makes sense, right? No, not so much. Those didn't work either. And so unfortunately, a lot of people died in the UK from the plague. We are going to be talking about some other diseases as well. And I've got some names of diseases up here that sound really funny. And I want you to guess and see if these are real diseases or fake diseases. And we'll let you know in just a second. All right, so we've got some interesting names for some diseases up here. Our first one is corn rage. Do you think corn rage is a real disease or a fake disease? Let's think about it. Corn rage. It sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? Let's see, is it real or fake? It's real! Now, corn rage is something that today we call ergotism, and it was caused by a kind of fungus that grows on corn and wheat and barley and things like that. And it would cause seizures and muscle spasms and things like that, and actually lead to what they would also call madness or rage back then as well. And so they called it corn rage because it came from eating infected corn. Next one, grocer's itch. Grocer's itch. Ew, that sounds gross. Didn't. Grocer's itch. Is it real or fake? Let's find out. It is real. Absolutely, it is real. Grocer's itch was actually caused by mites that would be on fruits and vegetables and things like that. And because greengrocers, would handle the fruit and vegetables, they would actually get bitten the most, which is why they called it grocer's itch. All right, next one is trench mouth. Trench mouth. I've heard of trench foot. What about trench mouth? What do you think? Real or fake? It is real as well. Trench mouth was caused by really poor oral hygiene or dental hygiene, and it was particularly prevalent in World War I when the soldiers in the trenches didn't have access to brushing their teeth and things like that, so they'd get things like gingivitis and other kinds of oral and dental hygiene problems. Next one is milk leg. You might be able to tell we've had a little bit of a pattern so far. Do you think milk leg is real or fake? It is real as well. Now, milk leg is actually what we would call today like deep vein thrombosis. It's a clot in your legs that would cause a lack of circulation, and your legs would then go pale. And it was actually quite common in women who had just given birth. And the reason why they called it milk leg is because they thought that it was a backup of milk in your legs. Now, obviously, we know today you don't have milk in your legs. But because this was so common in women who had just given birth, that they called it milk leg. All right, and next one, last one, speckled monster. Well, again, like I said, we've kind of had a pattern here. Do you think speckled monster is real or fake? It is also real. And speckled monster is actually the name they gave to what we now call smallpox. So as we said, smallpox is another disease that we're going to talk a little bit about now. And smallpox it sounds a little bit like chickenpox, which you've probably heard of before. You may have even had it before. And chickenpox is when you get all these little red bumps on your body, and they itch, and you might get a bit of a sore throat or a fever, and you might be sick for a few days, and then you usually get over it and you're okay. Smallpox is very different. Smallpox, even though it sounds like it shouldn't be as much of an issue, is actually a lot more dangerous than chickenpox. And they would get large welts on them. The welts could actually end up killing them. The disease could actually end up killing them in the long run. And so in 18th century China, they started looking at a process to try and protect themselves from catching this disease through a process called variolation. Now, what this was they would find people who had survived smallpox, and they would collect scabs off of their body, and then they would grind these scabs up, and they'd sniff them up just like this, if you can see. Oh, I'm so sorry. I got a little bit on you. Well, at least you're now protected from smallpox, right? Just kidding. They're not real. But do you think this would have worked? Do you think sniffing scabs would work? Actually, it did. Strangely enough, sniffing up the scabs from people who had survived the disease gave the people who sniffed them a little bit of immunity. And so what would happen is that the disease had been broken down by the person who survived, and so that would be passed on to the person who sniffed up the scabs, and that would actually protect them if the disease ever came to them in the future. Now, later on, Edward Jenner had a similar idea, but he did something a little bit different. So, Edward Jenner was a scientist in Britain in the 18th century as well, and he had a theory. He was actually from the University of St. Andrews. He had a theory that milkmaids who were catching cowpox were somehow protected from smallpox, because he noticed that those milkmaids weren't catching smallpox ever. And he had heard about this experiment done in the past while they were experimenting with smallpox on prisoners. And so he thought, well, I'm not going to use prisoners. I don't want to talk to them. Instead, we're going to use orphans. And so what he did, in this picture here, you can see this poor little kid over here is actually being injected with some of the pus from this lady's cowpox. Not very nice, is it? No, not so much. Definitely would not pass any board of ethics today, but what he did was he infected this child with cowpox. The kid got sick. He would be ill for a few days, and then he'd get over it. After that, as if that weren't enough, he then subjected him to smallpox. And he injected the smallpox into the child and watched to see if the child would get ill. And surprisingly, he did not. So Edward Jenner has actually discovered that using one virus has helped to protect against another virus. And this is what we call vaccination. vax is actually the Latin word for cow from cowpox, and so vaccination is another form of immunization. Now, not everyone can be vaccinated. Some people are too young, some people are too ill to be vaccinated, and in that case, we have something else that tries to protect them called herd immunity. And what that means is that when most of the population of a group of people are vaccinated, they can then help to protect against people who can't be vaccinated. Okay, and so we're actually going to do a quick demo about this just now. So herd immunity is a really good way to help protect people in a population who can't be vaccinated. And here, I have 6 volunteers up who are going to help prove what herd immunity is. And I also have a letter from King George here, my terrible accent here, stating that we may use these 6 volunteers to help prove that herd immunity, in fact, does work. So, what we've got are our volunteers 5 of our volunteers have been vaccinated. They've been vaccinated with these orange shields. Let me set this down for a second. With these orange shields here. And this volunteer has not been vaccinated. They are too ill. They have not been vaccinated. So, unfortunately, that means that he is more susceptible to becoming ill from our disease. Now, what I'm going to do is launch some disease-bearing germs from my launcher here, and we're going to see just how many of them hit our unvaccinated friend. So, here we go. Ready? Loaded. And here we go. 3, 2, 1. All right, so I couldn't count, obviously, because it was quite fast that it happened, but it looked like he got hit by a few of our germs, but he didn't get hit by all of them. And the benefit there is that the people who were vaccinated here were able to deflect some of those germs away, because what happens is that their bodies then break down those germs or those diseases, and they prevent them from being passed on to the person who is unvaccinated. Does that mean that we walk around society like this all the time, protecting people who aren't vaccinated from diseases? No, that would be silly. But what that does mean is that if I am vaccinated from some sort of disease, then my body will break down that disease, and that won't get passed on to somebody who then maybe isn't able to get vaccinated. So what this shows then is that having most of the people in a population vaccinated against a disease actually really helps those who can't be vaccinated in the long run as well. So what we have here in this picture, or this video I should say, is you actually have this large moving blob here is actually a white blood cell, or a neutrophil, and it has been trained to seek out certain kinds of bacteria, the same way that a vaccine or an immunization would work. And it's training it to look for this bacteria here. Okay, so this neutrophil is actually chasing this bacteria. And what happens is once it finds it, it latches on and it ingests it. So some people say it's like eating it, but that's not really exactly what's happening. What happens is it kind of surrounds it, it brings it into its cell, and then it breaks it apart. And what happens is after it breaks it apart, it actually lets go of all of the waste out the back, and then the body will actually get rid of it. And that is how we actually train our bodies to look out for bacteria and viruses and things like that to keep us safe. All right, so we have talked about how we can protect against diseases using things like immunizations and vaccinations, but still there are some times when we actually have to go inside the body and have a look at what's going on inside. And we do that through what we call surgery. And traditionally, when we think of surgery, we think of making a cut in the body, spreading the body open like that, fixing whatever's going on inside there, and sewing them back up. Now, that is really beneficial for doing a really quick surgery, potentially where a lot of space is covered. But because you're making a large cut like that, you're actually exposing the body to to a higher risk of infection. It's going to be fairly painful, and it takes a little bit longer to heal from a large cut like that. In the 1980s, Sir Alfred Couchieri at the University of Dundee actually pioneered research in something called keyhole surgery or laparoscopic surgery. And what that does is it actually looks inside of the body using very small cuts instead of making a large cut and opening the whole thing up. So this here is my friend Headless Legless Larry. And Headless Legless Larry has no head and has no legs, so he's already not doing so well. But he has come in for some surgery today, and so we're going to take a look inside. What we've done is we've made a few holes, a few cuts in his body here, and what we're going to do is we're going to use a camera like this. Okay, so if you look at the screen, you can see, okay, the end of this actually has a camera. Well, actually, this is the camera here. This is actually a glass lens here and a light source. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look inside my friend Larry here. And we're going to see what we can find. Let's see. Ooh, let's see. There, down here at the bottom, those are his intestines. Let's see. That's his liver. We've got a stomach over there. Let's see. What do we see up on top? Oh, there's his heart and his lungs. And I'm seeing some other stuff in there too. Uh-oh. It looks like he might have some gummy shrimp in there. I don't think he's supposed to have some gummy shrimp inside of his body. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a tool that looks like this. Okay? And I'm going to go inside the body here. And I'm going to see if I can find one of these gummy shrimp or bananas. Let's see. Now, this is really hard to do. I'm not very good at it. It takes regular surgeons 10 years of practicing doing keyhole surgery before they're even allowed to touch a body. So it is a very difficult skill to learn. So let's see if I can grab this banana here. I got it! Woohoo! So we have taken one of our bananas out, and I actually can't pull it out. Oh, maybe I can. Nope, can't do that. Perfect. Well, I've moved one of the bananas anyway out of Headless Legless Larry's abdomen, and I'm going to go ahead and take this out now. And what's really great is that medical research is constantly evolving and is constantly getting better. And we are constantly looking for cures for things like Ebola or coronavirus or Zika or new viruses that come up, new diseases that come up all the time. And maybe you will even be the next generation of scientists that will help save the world.